Hi everyone and welcome back. Around the summer of 2023, I tried the HiBy R6 Pro Mark II that looked so unconventional and, dare I say, unique to anything that I tried up to that point. The only three cons I had with that one was a lower power output, especially with planar magnetic headphones, less impressive dynamics, especially with desktop headphones, and also a shorter battery life, especially via the 4.4mm balanced output. A year and a half later, these guys came up with this bad boy, the R6 Pro Max, that tries to solve every single con I just mentioned at the price of being thicker, a little bit heavier, and also the price went up to $999 US. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so grab yourself a snack and a drink, and let's go ahead with this review. Ever since I started collecting all sorts of portable digital audio players a while ago, like Soundstage Sansa Clip, like iPod Nano, Creative Zen, and also Microsoft Zune. Yes, I had that one as well. I liked how fast they moved, how great was the user interface, how pocketable those were, but I didn't like the sound quality of those units. Those were okay, but not really outstanding. Then, a few years later, we started to see some hi-fi grade portable digital audio players that sounded much better, but the user interface was simply garbage. Those were very hard to use and very slow moving. Operating system was very slow, the CPU was slow. So I wanted something that will move fast and also sound great. And luckily, those days come, and I'm happy to tell that HiBy is part of this, community that drives forward portable digital audio players that look great, as you can see, and also move really fast with an open Android platform, so you can install anything. I'm also glad to say that HiBy didn't alter the winning formula that we saw on the R6 Pro Mark II. This one looks basically the same, and that is a big plus for me. We have the same 5.9-inch touchscreen. I believe it's huge. It's one of the biggest displays you can find on portable devices. It looks bezel-less as well, so overall it looks like a beefier smartphone in a way. It moves almost as fast, but clearly not as fast. Its display is big enough to mimic a modern smartphone rather than a portable DAP. And maybe, just maybe, HiBy can create a hi-fi grade smartphone somewhere in the future. That would be cool and something that I would personally buy, and even my son is very interested in a hi-fi grade smartphone with some balanced outputs. That would be great. Everybody is entitled to have an opinion, and my opinion is that I'm holding one of the most unique digital audio players of 2025. Under its hood, it rocks absolutely the same Snapdragon 665 that you can see on basically 99% of portable DAPs of today, even on the super expensive ones. This chip is slightly older nowadays, but I believe it's good enough for a portable DAP. I believe it does the job pretty nicely. We have the good old Android 12. It's unlocked, obviously, so you can install any third-party app you desire, including games, browsers, email clients, anything you already have installed on your phone. We have a Google Play Store, so you can install basically anything. RAM size went up from 4 gigs to 6 gigs, so you can now multitask a little faster. ROM memory doubled from 64 gigs to 128, which is not so much, but decent to have. You can install all your apps on the internal memory, and all of your offline music can go to the micro SD card. By the way, the micro SD cards are nowadays so cheap, so you can expand the memory pretty easily, and that won't cost you an arm and a leg. Those 612 gigs or 1 terabyte cards are so cheap nowadays, so you can have maybe some extra cards if you want. Moving on to everything that has to do with audio, we don't have one but two flagship grade ESS 9039 Pro DAC chips. Those can be usually found in desktop grade components, but we have them on this portable device, which is great. They also used all 4 channels of that silicon, so we have 8 channels, which is quite amazing because they're trying to squeeze the maximum performance. Also, the current to voltage conversion stage uses all 8 channels, and those are amplified by OPA 6 and 12 op amps, so that is already great. The amp stage uses two OPA 1622 op amps per channel. We have two channels and these are dual op amps. So clearly the signal path remains fully balanced, which is great. The power output almost doubled compared to its predecessor, actually to its smaller brother R6 Pro Mark II. It right now provides up to 700 milliwatts per channel via its 4.4mm balanced output and about 180 milliwatts per channel via its regular headphone jack. The power output nearly doubled, so clearly we needed a much beefier battery, and that's why choosing an 8200 mAh battery will solve the biggest issue I had with the original R6 Pro Mark II. The Pro Max now offers up to 10 hours on its regular headphone jack versus 7 hours on the R6 Pro Mark II, and we also have 9 hours of use on the balanced output, but in reality I've got around 7 hours and a half with a pair of HiBy HE1000 unveiled used on high gain. Besides this, an MQA decoder and a two-way Bluetooth sender and receiver are also on board. If you want to know more about it, then may I suggest checking its official webpage, which I left below, as I believe is the right time to hit some eardrums and check some of my listening impressions. First of all, I need to tell you that after playing around for years with some top-of-the-line DACs and headphone amplifiers that try to push the boundary of hi-fi listening, sometimes it's becoming so difficult to downgrade my listening experience and try some less impressive stuff, but still trying to connect with my tunes. Sometimes that part is very difficult because I start hearing so many cons and not so many pros. The interesting part is that I'm not getting a similar vibe from the HiBy R6 Pro Max. Personally, I'm not much of IM user. Yes, I use IMs, but mostly when traveling all across the world or maybe when visiting some hi-fi shows across Europe. But since I'm working from home, filming and writing for you guys like 10 hours a day, I tend to use desktop headphones most of the time. They sound much bigger, everything is just much nicer, much more spacious, much more relaxed. I hear most stuff via desktop headphones, especially with some high-grade planar magnetic headphones, so that's why I'm using desktop headphones most of the time. The only problem I have with these desktop headphones is that they demand lots of power to be fully driven, to be controlled, something that battery-powered devices don't have as much. But that is not always the case, especially if the headphone amplifier is biased in class A operation, something that already happens on the HiBy R6 Pro Max. In my HiBy R6 Pro Mark II, I mentioned not one but two elephants in the room: the weak power output and also the short battery life. Those parts I didn't like that much because it simply limited the usability and also defeated the purpose of using such a portable device. And its limited power output of 300 milliwatts of power per channel was not so great with a few desktop headphones. But still, in that state, when engaged the Class A working mode, I was able to drive a few desktop headphones up to Meze Elite and Erzetish Charybdis while offering me around 5 hours of playtime. But on this boy I'm getting around 7 hours and a half, so the playtime is by 50% higher, which is already great. And how about the desktop headphones? Right now I can drive up to HiBy HE1000 unveiled and also T+A Solitaire P, so those are considerably harder to drive, yet this one is driving them close to their fullest potential. The highest volume I could reach was around 70, maybe 75 out of 100 steps available, so I had a decent amount of headroom remaining, which is great. Suddenly, from a limited DAP in terms of usability with desktop headphones, we arrive at a much more interesting proposition that can drive some additional headphones, a wider selection of headphones, while offering some extra 2 hours and a half of playtime. So these guys learned about their past mistakes, going back to the drawing board and coming up with a much more interesting unit. The overall sound tuning of the R6 Pro Max is not your usual ESS Sabre affair. So after having this one for a couple of days, it never appeared as lifeless sounding to me. The trebles never screech, so this one is not bright or harsh or piercing sounding, it's not happening. This one is also not boring or lifeless and more like dynamic and fun. And also it's not 2D sounding like sometimes I'm getting with smaller devices. Actually, I know these guys HiBy for a couple of years now, and I'm yet to hear a unit that is not trying to make you move. Just engage that Class A working mode and watch those earlobes dance to the rhythm of the music. That is always happening with this one. The sound can be described as incredibly clean and resolving, but without becoming clinical. So this part is actually quite important. I've used several headphones that have a really strong treble output, very extended in the treble, like T+A Solitaire P and also HE1000 unveiled by HiFiman. Those are really strong in this regard, and yet the sound was actually quite lush and dare I say even organic on several occasions, especially after engaging Class A and Extended Dynamics plugin. This is exactly how I would describe a well-made ESS Sabre DAC with a beefy amplifier stage, pushing and pulling headphones. The sound is a bit punchier than that of the R6 Pro Mark II, also outperforming even the Shelling M5 Ultra and also the Onyx XM5. Having a bigger amp stage and plenty of room to breathe, the sound doesn't feel limited in terms of dynamics, and it's more trying to mimic the sound of a desktop DAC and headphone amp combo. In terms of Soundstage, the R6 Pro Max is seriously outplaying something like a Fire M23, and it's marginally better compared to its smaller brother R6 Pro Mark II, sounding a little bit wider on the X axle and a little bit deeper on the Y axle. So thus, I believe that the stereo separation is improving on the newer and beefier unit, and you can feel that better with some open back desktop headphones. I don't know what happens with my body lately because I'm slowly moving away from my wild past, listening to rock and metal, and I'm more into old smoky blues and jazz nowadays. And I must say that this one does proper justice to blues and jazz. There is a certain level of authenticity to the sound that I usually get from AC powered units, but a hint of that authenticity, oomph, sound density, warmth and control is still present on the R6 Pro Max. I will leave a few words regarding its frequency response, but please understand there are so many sound settings and sound enhancements that if you put two R6 Pro Max near each other, they might sound very different. Besides the usual EQ that you can find on every other modern DAP, here you can install some custom audio plugins that are working on the hardware level. You can increase the soundstage or enhance dynamics. We also have some cleverly made MSEB settings at our disposal that will have a tremendous impact on its bass, mid-range and treble, and I'm not talking only about their intensity or loudness, but also about their sound style. For example, you can make the bass fast or thumpy, you can move the voices forward or make them recessed, you can make the treble soft or crisp, and there is so much more. The best part is that it sounded right from the get-go, and I didn't need to change too many things. But of course, you can tailor it to your needs and make it your own. And that's precisely why I will describe it in the stock form without applying plugins or engaging MSEB settings. Engaging a wild playlist, it was clear to me that it knows how to impress a bass addict that loves not only strong kicks in the eardrums, but also a clean, layered and beautiful outline of the bass. The R6 Pro Max is not trying to reinvent the wheel, and in this regard, it follows the same path that HiBy paved for a very long time with their R6 Pro Mark II, R8 Mark II, RS8 as well. I believe that we're getting a higher quality bass than usual, and there is enough punch in the bass as well. But of course, if you want to make it even punchier, you can always engage those dynamics plugin and add a little bit more oomph and energy in the lowest octaves. Perhaps the biggest surprise for most of you will be its mid-range performance. Usually, ESS Sabre and mid-range should never be used in the same sentence, but that's not the case when discussing HiBy devices, especially if those are beefy and quite bigger than usual. As you know by now, I really love listening to everything that has to do with female voices, regardless if it's a high-pitched soprano, maybe a low-intensity soothing voice, or maybe a wild scream. I simply love the way female voices sound, especially if there's enough power and control to have a nicer control over the vocal cords. The R6 Pro Max adds just a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of lushness. Not a lot of it, but enough to be carried away, and I believe in the classy working mode there is enough control over the vocal cords. Trebles always sounded crystal clear, defined, and also quite extended past top octave, but at the same time I found them soft, gentle, and quite refined. So you don't need to lower the volume of your favorite tunes or use a different set of IMs or headphones to fully enjoy the music. Such things are not necessary, as it has just the right tonality for me without messing around with EQ, plugins, or MSEB settings. Wrapping up, the 3 important complaints that I had on the R6 Pro Mark II have been dealt with. So finally we have much better dynamics on this one. Finally we have more power on tap, almost twice as much. So I can drive some heavier loads like a T+A Solitaire P and HE1000 Unveiled by HiBy, and finally the battery life went up by around 50%. All of these improvements will cost you an additional $250 and a bit of pocket space since it's also a little bit thicker. As for me, the R6 Pro Max stays at the very edge of what I would consider to be pocketable and portable, since it's a little thicker and heavier than usual, but considering all of the improvements I see with this one, I can recommend this one to you. Alright everyone, please let me know in the comment section below what you think about the HiBy R6 Pro Max. And as usual, thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers!